3. And this is, at this point, Moses is in the wilderness. He was the prince of Egypt. He helped protect one of the people. And now he's 80 years old. He fled Egypt when he was 40. He's been in the backside of the wilderness for 40 years. He's now 80 years old. And it says in Exodus chapter 3, verse 1, "Now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed." Heavenly Father, as we look at this and other encounters with the angel of the Lord, I pray that you guard and guide the words that I say. Help everyone to understand an application to their own lives. I ask in Jesus' name, amen. So it says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a burning bush. That was a unique experience. And, of course, in cartoons or movies, they take license. We don't know exactly whether it happened in a cave or whatever, but we do know this did take place. But in verse 6, the angel of the Lord says, "Moreover, he said," this is the angel of the Lord speaking, "I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." It clearly identifies the fact that he's God. So this is the angel of the Lord, not an angel. This is the angel of the Lord. And he mentioned then in verse 7, he said, "And the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people which are in Egypt, and have heard their cry by reason of the taskmasters, for I know their sorrows." God knows the troubles that we go through. It's an amazing number of songs that came out of they call them spirituals, out of slavery. And there's one song that says, "Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows the sorrows." But then it goes on, it says, "Nobody knows but Jesus." God knows the troubles. God knows the sorrow. There are going to be time when no one else sees what you're going through. But here we have this group of people who are oppressed. And we see this happening in Israel right now, where the very descendants of Ishmael are opposing the descendants of Isaac, his half-brother, and that's what's going on in the Middle East. I was looking through a copy of Life magazine from 1943 this week, and in it there was an article about establishing a homeland for the Jews, that after the end of World War I, England and other nations, the League of Nations, had decided to create a land, and it talked about that in the article, how it was creating Lebanon and Jordan for the Arabs and for the Palestinians. People today say, create a Palestinian homeland. It was done. It was already done. There's two of them. There's Jordan and there's Lebanon. And there was one for the Jews, Israel. They're trying to take more. But God says, here, I know what you're going through. He knew it. He said it. And they were, these people, I mean, the years that they went through of the persecution and the killing, the oppression. And it's like Golda Meir, who was the prime minister of Israel, said one time, we have no place else to go. You know our history. We have no place else to go. And she said this, you can't make peace with people who want to kill you. It's in the Quran. It is very, very clear. Ibn Abdullah Muhammad said the Jews shall never have a home. That's what they're trying to enforce. It's not that they want the entire thing to be Palestine. And it wasn't Palestine until it was so declared by the country of England. But there's that oppression that was going on. And what they had back then was this was worse. I mean, the Jews had, of course, they'd gone through what happened in Nazi Germany, and then in Russia. Of course, in Russia, it had been going on long before it had in Germany. The Russians forever had been persecuting Jews. They called them the pogroms. And they would come in, and you ever watch some of there's movies based on that. Fiddler on the Roof was based on that persecution. Feifel, An American Tale, the cartoon with the mouse, all based on pre-Nazi Germany. The Russians were killing Jews, massacring them, persecuting them. They put them into one area called the Pale, and they kept them all in this one particular area. And so they've been through great oppression, and God says, I know the sufferings. And he says in verse 8, and I am come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians. God says, I'm going to deliver them. How's he going to do that? With Moses. Too many times we want God to intervene. Matthew West wrote a song and talks about how he looked down and I saw the suffering and I said to God, why don't you do something? And he said, I did. I created you. We always want someone else to make the difference. God says it starts with you. And so here now the angel Lord comes and starts giving, and from the rest of these encounters, always giving different personal tasks. And he says, I'm coming down to deliver them. And what was he going to do? He's going to use Moses to do it. And in this, in verse 13 and 14, when Moses said to him, who am I going to say called me? In verse 14 it says, and God said unto Moses, I am that I am. In Hebrew, that is the letters, what we would look at in English. It looks like YHWH. YHWH. It's pronounced Yahweh. People have anglicized it and made the word Jehovah out of it. There's no such word in Hebrew. Can't get there from that. King James translators often translated Yahweh as Jehovah, but that's not a right translation there. So here it is, I am. And later we find out when Jesus comes, he says, I am. I am the bread of life. I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. Ed, good to see you out of the hospital and back here with us too today. So that was the encounter with Moses, very dramatic encounter. Next one we find in the Bible is Numbers chapter 22. You go ahead to, after Leviticus, come to Numbers chapter 22. Remember, the very first appearance of the angel of the Lord was to a non-Jew. And now in Numbers chapter 22 and verse 22, God's anger was kindled against, and God's anger was kindled because he's talking to a prophet named Balaam. So there's a Gentile prophet by the name of Balaam. The Canaanites, the people in the land, the descendants of Ishmael, said, we cannot have the Jews coming in here, and we need God to curse them. And so they're asking this Gentile to talk to God on their behalf. He said, no, I can't do that. I can't curse this people. God's on their side. And then they said, we'll pay you. Okay. So he's going, and God's upset with him. He said God's anger was kindled because he went. And the angel of the Lord stood in the way for an adversary against him. So the angel of the Lord stands in front of him. And he doesn't see him. He doesn't see him. And it says, now he was riding upon his ass, and his two servants are with him. And the ass saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way, and his sword drawn in his hand. So he doesn't see it, but the angel does. This is not talking about the body part, okay? That's, okay. Yeah, people can humorously, that was the name for like a donkey back then. And so he turned aside out of the way and went into the field, and Balaam smote the ass to turn her into the way. So the angel, the animal sees the angel. In my book on what does the Bible say about animals and where do animals go when they die, I mentioned this encounter and others. It appears animals can see angels, okay, that they can see them. But it says then in verse 24, so he goes out of the way. But the angel of the Lord stood in the path of the vineyards, a wall being on this side and a wall on that side. So now he's in a path, and there's a wall on each side of him, a wall of rocks, picture that. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she thrust herself into the wall and crushed Balaam's foot against the wall. So she's like, oh! She goes to stop and crushes his foot. And he smote her again. And the angel of the Lord went further and stood in the narrow place, where was no way to turn either to the right hand or the left. So now it's so skinny, there's no place else to go. And when the ass saw the angel of the Lord, she fell down under Balaam. She's like, I'm not going any further. I see that angel. He's got a sword. I'm not going there. And Balaam's anger was kindled, and he smote the ass with his staff. I love this next verse. And the Lord opened the mouth of the ass. It does not say God spoke through his animal. It just says he opened his mouth, gave him the ability to speak in a way that Balaam could understand. I believe that animals, we all know animals communicate. Animals try to talk to you. You've seen that? I'll look at them sometimes, and one of them will be looking at me like, why are you sitting in my chair? It's like, it's my chair, but in the cat's mind, it's their chair. And this one will just sit there and she'll look at me like, and just stare me down. Did it the night before last. I'm sitting there and she's just like, what do you want? She's just looking at me like, get out of my chair. There's times when the animal wants to say to you, you are stupid. Right? I mean, there's things that you will do. And it says here, it doesn't say the Lord spoke through. It says God, the angel, opened the mouth of the ass. The Lord did. And she said unto Balaam, what have I done unto thee that thou hast smitten me these 3 times? And Balaam said unto the ass, because thou hast mocked me. Now wait a minute, he's talking to his animal. I mean, if it was me, I would have gone, whoa, you're talking? I don't get it. How are you talking? That's like Eve when she walks into the garden and the serpent's in the tree and it starts to talk. She doesn't go, whoa, a snake can talk? Did you notice she wasn't surprised at all? Not at all. Wait till we get to heaven, huh? And you find in the Bible all these different creatures that, are supernatural beings that do not look like humans at all, that talk. So wait till we get to heaven. But here's this encounter with a Gentile prophet, and he's telling him, your way is contrary to me. And he stands in front of him to try to stop him from doing what he's doing. And he didn't see him. And God tries to intervene for you a lot of times, you just don't see him. When you get to heaven, you're going to look back on your life and go, oh, look at that. Right before I made that stupid mistake, they were standing right there. They were trying to protect me. God sent a messenger, and I didn't listen. The next encounter we find is in Judges chapter 2. You go a little further as we move ahead in the Bible here. You have Joshua, then you end up in Judges. And in Judges chapter 2, we find the next encounter with the angel of the Lord. And it's in verse 1. It says, the angel of the Lord. And it says an angel of the Lord, but later we find out it is actually the angel of the Lord, came from Gilgal unto Bochum and said, I made you go up out of Egypt and have brought you unto the land which I swear unto your fathers. And I said, I will never break my covenant with you. And you shall make no league with the inhabitants of the land. Ye shall throw down their altars, but ye have not obeyed my voice. Ye have not obeyed my voice. So here he appears to all the children of Israel and tells them, look, I gave you a task, but you did not obey God, and you did not claim the promises. Notice he says you did not obey my voice. Okay? So he's saying this is speaking as God. And the angel spoke to all of them. He spoke to all of them as a people to intercede for the Jews. And their response was they wept, they worshiped, and they went. They wept when they realized they were wrong. They worshiped the God who was talking to them, and they decided to go in and possess the land just like he said. One of the most famous being one of the 2 survivors of the wilderness experience when they rejected going into the promised land, 2 of them. They came to the edge of the promised land, and God said, go in. They said, no, let's send spies in first. I remember that. And they come to the edge of the promised land, and they said, God says, go in, take the land. And they said, no, let's send in spies. So they send in 1 man from each tribe. And when they come back, Joshua and Caleb come back with a thing of grapes so heavy that one person can't carry it. It's suspended on a pole between their shoulders. If you go to Israel to this day and you go to a souvenir shop, almost every souvenir shop sells one of those made out of olive wood. And it's a very common souvenir. So they come back and they say it is a land flowing with milk and honey. Look at all this. But the other 10 said it's a land filled with giants, with fenced and walled cities. They're more powerful to us than we look like grasshoppers in their sight. And what did you do with grasshoppers back then? You stepped on them. Right? Because they would eat you, they turn into locusts when they get all riled up. And so they said, let's take a vote. And the children of Israel voted and said, no, we're not going in. God said, fine. All of you from 40 years old and older are going to die. You spend the next 40 years in the wilderness until you're all dead. Then you go in the land. They didn't want to go. God says, okay, don't go. Only 2 people survived, Joshua and Caleb. Everybody under age 40 did. So now they come to the edge of the promised land and they go in. And it was interesting because Caleb said, I want that mountain. I want the mountain. He wanted the mountain where the actual giants, there really were some giants, meaning that they were like 9 feet to 10 feet tall. We find that out, and there's archaeological evidence that has supported that. And so he says, let me go in. But at first, the rest of the children of Israel, they were too afraid. And you ever have God wants you to do something, but you're too afraid to do what he wants you to do? I can't do it. I feel like a grasshopper. You know, well, a little grasshopper, we will teach you karate. No, there are things that, you know, God will help you to get into that promised land, but you got to realize you've been wrong. And you need to worship the Lord and need to go your way. And that's what the angel of the Lord told the whole group of the children of Israel. And did they obey? No. If they had obeyed, there would be no Palestinian problem today. There would be no problem today if they had obeyed. They didn't obey. So what happens again then in Judges chapter 5? We find another encounter with the angel of the Lord. God has to raise up different people to lead Israel. They're not listening to him, so he keeps raising up these judges. And these judges speak on behalf of God. They're just ordinary people like you and I. You'll see all these are just ordinary people that God uses. And the only difference is God says go, and they went finally. But he tells them to go, and he comes to a guy named Barak, and he says, I want you to lead the children of Israel. And he says, I can't, I just can't do it. God says, okay, I'll use Deborah. Or if you're Hebrew, Deborah. So Deborah, same person, just pronounced a little differently. And God chooses a woman to lead the armies of Israel. Her name was Deborah. And in Judges chapter 5, in verse 19, it says, the kings came and fought. Then fought the kings of Canaan and Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. By the way, you're going to hear about Megiddo in the last days. It's north of Jerusalem. It's a big plain, it's a big area, and there's going to be a great battle that's going to take place between the kings of the east and others. Kings of the east, who's that? I think we believe it's China. The Megiddo, also the kings of the north, Gog and Magog, Russia. It says Russia, China, all these are going to come against Israel. I was just reading that as a news headline today. How Russia and China are getting involved in what's going on in the Middle East. China has just sent their fleet over there to the Middle East. Did you know that? So they've sent their fleet they're right off of Oman now. And it says they were going to meet at Megiddo. By the way, at the north end of Megiddo, overlooking the valley of Megiddo. And Megiddo, the whole area is called Armageddon. Armageddon. And at the north end of Armageddon is a little town called Nazareth. Nazareth. And so God says to them that so down verse 19, and it says, they fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. The stars, we find in the book of Revelation, that's a reference to angels. Angels literally got involved in this battle. The river of the Kishon swept them away. The ancient river, the river Kishon, O my soul, thou hast trodden down strength. So all of this goes on. So you got the angels involved. You have the river flooding people. And then it says, curse ye, Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, against the mighty. Blessed above woman shall Jael, the wife of Eber, the Kenite, be. Blessed shall she be above women in the tent. You say, well, how did this? Another woman came into the story. So here God says to the man, you lead the army of Israel against the enemies. They're like, no, I don't think I can do it. God says, okay, I'm going to use Deborah. Okay, so Deborah says, okay, she goes, and then the angels get involved. And then this lady Jael, who in the world is Jael? She's this person who, she goes into Sisera, who's the captain of the Canaanite army. So basically, he's the captain of the Palestinians. She goes in and kills him. A woman says, that's it. This guy's no good. He dies. Boom. She obeys God. And it's all involving the angel of the Lord. Whoa, okay. God's intervening for these people. And so you end up with Deborah, Barak, and Jael all getting involved in this. Then, chapter 6, you would think after what a great victory, angels got involved, that they would be doing well. But what happens, verse 6, and the children of Israel, chapter 6, verse 1, the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. In the book of Judges, you're going to find a cycle. This happens with you and me too. Throughout the book of Judges, you will find that the children of Israel will sin. As a result of their sin, they end up in servitude. They're oppressed by somebody. They're having to serve someone, whether it's debt, whether it's somebody else, another country. Then supplication, where they finally ask God for help. And then salvation. That cycle. Sin, servitude, supplication, salvation. So now they're sinning. And they finally call upon God and they ask for some help. And in Judges chapter 6, in verse 11, we find a Jewish guy by the name of Gideon. He's so afraid of the enemy, and the enemy's confiscating all of their food, that at night he hides behind some rocks and the pillars and he threshes his wheat. So he's hiding. He's afraid. And it says, verse 11, and then came an angel of the Lord. And again, this is actually the angel of the Lord. Sat under an oak, which was in Ophrah. Ophrah. There was a lady years ago, she had a child, and she meant to name it Ophrah, but she spelt it wrong, according to the story. And the lady became known as Oprah. But this is Ophrah. That pertaineth unto Joaz the Azabite, and his son Gideon threshed wheat by the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. Okay? So first we see it says an angel, but now look in verse 12. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor. I'm hiding. You're hiding from the enemy, and God comes to Gideon and says, Thou mighty man of valor. Aren't you glad God doesn't see you the way you see you? Or other people see you? I remember when I was in Bible school, they had we had a class, and they were called preacher boys. Our pastor and the head of the school, Dr. Jerry Falwell, called us preacher boys. At first I thought, boys? Come on, we're men now. No, preacher boys. And he asked what you want to do. And I remember this one guy, David Knight, and he said, I want to go start a church in New York City. He's a country boy. I'm from New York City. I don't know if he'd ever been in New York City. And I thought, David, you are not going to make it. And David would study very seriously. He'd get to class early before everybody else, and he'd be reading his Bible. And you could actually come in and he wouldn't hear you. And then I'd put my hand and go, Hi, David. And he'd go, Whoa! This is the guy that was going to go to New York City and start a church. I thought, yeah, right. Not him. Guess what? He did. And he did a great job. Because God doesn't see you the way other people see you. And he saw him and saw a mighty man of valor. And even though he was afraid, he said to him, and the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said that. And then Gideon said unto him, O my Lord, if the Lord be with us, why then is all this befallen us? And where be all his miracles which our fathers told us of? He wants a miracle. He wants to see a miracle before he's going to serve God. There's too many times like that. We want somebody else, we want God to intervene, we want somebody else to do it, or we want God to do a miracle, and God says, no, I want you to go. I want you to lead my people. Oh, he put out a fleece, and he said, two different situations. If I wake up in the morning and there's water on the fleece and it's not on the ground, I'll know it's you. And that happens, and then he says, let's turn her the other way around. If there's water on the ground, not on the fleece. So they talk about Gideon's fleece. And finally God says, just go. This is stupid. Why are you doing this? You always set out a fleece. God, if you will do this, I will do this. God says, no, you just do this. Too many times. How many times said to God, God, if you'll do this for me, I'll do this. If I win the lottery, I'll tithe. Yeah, right. And then we find in Judges chapter 13, this time God appears not to the individual that's going to do something wonderful, but to his parents. In chapter 13, again, the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of God. There's the sin problem. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of the Philistines 40 years. There's the servitude. And there was a certain man of Zorah, of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and bare not. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto the woman. The angel of the Lord comes and appears to the woman, who's barren. Whoa, does that sound familiar? Like we heard that before? Remember with Abraham? Remember with a woman years later by the name of Mary and Joseph? He says, behold, now thou art barren and bearest not, but thou shalt conceive and bear a son. And he tells him this son's going to be different than anybody else. I pray that he's not going to drink wine or strong drink, nor eat any unclean thing. For lo, thou shalt conceive and bear a son, and no razor shall come on his head, for this child shall be a Nazarite unto God from the womb, and he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. So God comes to this woman and says, you're going to have a son. I know you thought you've been wanting to have a kid, you haven't been able to have any child. I'm going to give you a child now. But he's not going to be like any other child, not allowed to drink wine. The word wine there in the Hebrew, in the Old Testament, means anything pertaining to the vine. Not only fermented. We think of wine as fermented. It meant grape juice back then. So this guy's not even going to be able to drink grape juice. He can't have grape juice, he can't have grape jam, he can't have jelly, he can't have anything to do with grapes. And he's not supposed to cut his hair. And so when she has a son, what's his name? Samson. A lot of people confuse Samson and Hercules. Hercules is a mythological being. Samson's a real person. And you know the whole story with Samson and Delilah and cutting his hair. And his strength wasn't in his hair. His strength was in a commitment to God. That he would be different. That God would use somebody different. And told him, I'm going to prepare a deliverer. And the deliverer is going to be different from anyone else. That happens later, doesn't it? And then the encounter with David. It's interesting. You can read, just for sake of time, I'm not going to do it, 2 Samuel chapter 24 and 1 Chronicles chapter 21. This is the only encounter. David, who writes all the beautiful Psalms. David, who says, the Lord is my shepherd. David, who becomes the king of Israel, never has an encounter with the angel of the Lord until this time. There was a time when he did something bad in his life. And it wasn't the sin with Bathsheba. It wasn't that. God told him, he gave a promise to Israel, I'm going to give you more kids than you can even number. He said, don't ever count them. He said, just don't count them. And so David decides he wants to figure out what his strength of his army is and people, and he decides to hold a census, and God says, don't do it. And David does it. He disobeys God. You see, in that little thing, yep, God holds him accountable because God says, don't do it. I don't care what God says to you. If you don't do it, it's wrong. And the very angel of the Lord interceded and came to David and says, okay, what do you want me to do? I'm going to give you three choices. I'm going to give you choices of how I'm going to punish Israel. I'm going to punish them because of you. I'm going to punish them because of you. Your life can affect other people around you. There's other people get hurt because you make wrong choices. You make wrong decisions. It's not just you. You're a light. And when you put a bushel over that light, it affects everybody around you. So the angel of the Lord comes to this awesome person by the name of King David to pronounce judgment. He took a census contrary to what God said, and his people were judged by the angel of the Lord. And then you encounter a guy named Elisha in 1 Kings chapter 19. Some of you may be familiar with Elisha. He's like this really, the stories about Elisha are just amazing. And so after Samuel, you've got Kings. And in 1 Kings, you come to chapter 19. And this was a prophet to the northern part of Israel. This is when there are, in chapter 18, actually before chapter 18, Elisha appeared to the ruler Ahab, and he said, it's not going to rain because of your wickedness. And there was a drought. There was a drought. There was no rain because of their wickedness. And Ahab put a price on the head of Elisha, said, if you can bring him to me dead or alive, you're going to get rewarded. Finally, Elisha appears to one of the prophets and says, go tell King Ahab I said this. He says, if I tell him that, he's going to kill me. But he said, here's the challenge. Let's go to the mountain over there, and we're going to go to Mount Carmel, not over here near Patterson. Those things threw me off as a kid. It's like, there's Carmel. Why is it? It's in the wrong place. But he said, tell you what, we're going to have this challenge. You bring all the prophets of Baal. They're the false god you worship. And Baal, some of us believe that he actually is a demon, that he was not just a make-believe god, but a real demon with a name, like Moloch, and there's others. But so they said, okay, you get your prophets, you appear on the mountain, and I'm going to appear on the mountain. Here's the challenge. Whichever God answers by fire, he will be God, and that's who we're going to serve. Now, if you were a false prophet and you have a make-believe God, are you going to respond to that? Of course not. You know why they responded? Because their God did answer with fire before. Angels are supernatural, as we'll see in our encounters as we go on with the messages. They can do amazing things. So can the devil. Remember when Moses appeared before Pharaoh? And God told him to have Aaron throw down his rod, and it would become a snake, and it did. Do you remember what Pharaoh's servants did? They threw down their rods, and they also became snakes. You know anybody that can do that? That's not an illusion. The great thing was Aaron's snake ate their snake. My God's bigger than your God. So here we had the situation. They get on the top of on the mountain there, and they have the challenge. And the prophets of Baal, they're dancing around and they're crying and they start cutting themselves, thinking that's going to help. And at one point, Elisha says, "Hey, where's your God? Is he on vacation?" Maybe he went to let, L-E-T. Maybe he letteth, L-E-T-T-E-T-H, letteth. Do you know what that means? It means to go to the bathroom. He's mocking them. He says, "Hey, maybe your God's on the toilet and he can't hear you. You know? Can't answer the phone right now." And it came to the point they couldn't even talk. They're dancing, "Baal, Baal." They're about to pass out. And it's Elisha's turn. What did Elijah do? He says, "Pour water on my altar." You want to start on fire? You want the God to answer by fire, and you pour water on it? He says, "Pour more water on it, and more water on it." And then he calls to God, and what happens? God sends down fire, and it eats up the altar. It eats up the water, and it eats up the prophets of Baal. Okay? So here's a great victory. And then in chapter 19, it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done. This is his wife. Remember, I don't know about you, but when I think of the Disney villainesses, I think one of the meanest ones out there is Cruella de Vil. Right? You ever see it? Cruella de Vil. And just something about Cruella de Vil. And that's what I think of when I think of Jezebel. I've actually met someone who named their kid Jezebel. I mean, can't believe that. But I've met someone who made the kid Lucifer, too. But it says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done with all how he'd slain all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a message unto Elijah, saying, "So, let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as one of them by tomorrow about this time." In other words, "Oh, you killed my prophets? You wait till tomorrow." Wait a minute. Your God just got defeated. Amazingly defeated. And still you're threatening this guy. And so what does Elijah do? Does Elijah say, "Whoa, my God just did something wonderful"? No, Elijah runs away. He's afraid of one woman. Wasn't afraid of hundreds of prophets of Baal. Wasn't afraid of the king. He's afraid of one woman. And he runs away. And he flees. And he goes away and he gets out into the wilderness. And he's sleeping under a juniper tree. And an angel touched him and talked to him and told him he needs strength. And it says that he sent him away. And it says that he went up into a mountain. So the angel Lord comes to him and says, "Just go up to this mountain." And he gets up into the mountain, and a storm goes by, and he didn't hear God. And lightning goes by, and he didn't hear God. But it says, finally, a still, small voice. God doesn't have to thunder and roar, but in a still, small voice, he spoke to him. And Elijah realized he needed to go. And then later in 2 Kings chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, you can look that up, but you'll find that God sent him to confront a king. This is way after Ahab. And this king was seeking Beelzebub. You've heard that name, haven't you? Beelzebub. A lot of people think it's Satan. I actually think it's another demon. I mean, he has all qualities. I think he's like a Michael or Gabriel to Satan. And the angel Lord sends him to him and says, "Why are you seeking the wrong enemy? Why are you seeking the wrong God? You're seeking the wrong God." We need to let people know there is a wrong God. It's a shame how many Christians will have things in their home they shouldn't have. A little fat Buddha sitting on their front steps. That's not artwork. That's a symbol of another religion. That's contrary to God. You need to understand that. You need to be careful. It was interesting. We just had a trunk or treat at the fire department. One of the fellows that's running the trunk or treat, he said, he said, "I know we do this because it's fun and it's good for the kids," but he said, "There's aspects about Halloween we should not be celebrating." And so he didn't let his family dress up as demons or witches or goblins or dead, because that's the wrong stuff. It's actually comes, it's a pagan holiday. It's incredible. It's totally pagan holiday. And the question is, did All Saints' Day come first, or did Halloween? I think Halloween came first, and All Saints' Day came to counteract it the next day. But that's a debate. The thing is, there's things about it that we have to be careful what we embrace. We have to be careful of the things that we embrace. You can celebrate fall. You can celebrate fun. I don't think it's wrong with the kids dressing up and having fun like that, but we never let our kids dress as witches and goblins and things like that. We would dress as Star Wars, and things, or kitties, cats. Is that what you were last night? Were you a cat? No, you were a princess. Violet was a princess. Yep, she helped over there. And then there was the encounter with the Assyrians. And Isaiah chapter 37, verse 36, again, I'll let you look that up on your own, but Isaiah and Hezekiah, and it talks how the angel of the Lord miraculously destroyed Israel's enemy. They didn't have to fight. This time God just came down and says, you're out of here. And by the way, the Bible says in the last days, when the kings of the north and kings of the east, and they come against Israel, God himself is going to destroy them. Watch the movie Left Behind, especially the Kirk Cameron version. And you'll see the miraculous portrayal. It's just a Hollywood portrayal of it, but I think it's got it right. That God himself is going to intervene. And there's many things in history with Napoleon, with the winters of the march against Russia, and all these different things historically. It really looks like God saved different people at different times. And then in Zechariah, you can look that up too, Zechariah chapter 1, verse 9 through 16, and verse 34, where Zechariah was to pronounce judgment, and the instruction came from the angel of the Lord. A lot of people say, well, Jesus is so nice, he's so kind, he's so loving. Yes, but he didn't realize that Jesus spoke more about hell than anybody else. Do you know why? Because it's a real place and doesn't want anyone to go there. And sin is so bad that God will intervene. God will intervene. And we need to realize that usually it's us taking a stand. And that brings us to the last encounter. It doesn't particularly say in Daniel chapter 3 that the angel of the Lord appeared. But based on everything else we know about the angel of the Lord, most Bible scholars agree that this is the last appearance of the angel of the Lord in the Old Testament. In Daniel chapter 3, we found out that their children of Israel had been taken captive, and they're held up there in Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar's the king, and they had to pray only to God, and these three would not pray to the false god. And so it said there, you go down to Daniel chapter 3, verse 12. It says, there were certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. These are the accusers saying this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. They're not going to bow the knee. And then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now, if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music. Isn't it interesting that music was used for the false god? Ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? What a challenge. You bow down, you live. You don't, you get thrown in a fiery furnace. And what God can deliver from me? The amazing answer. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou set up. They said, our God's able. And he will deliver us. That could be, we're going to go to heaven when we're in the fire. But if God doesn't, says, we're still not going to bow. Can you say that? There's too many people, the world puts a gun to your head. You don't even have to put a gun to your head. They just offer you something and you do wrong. And Nebuchadnezzar was full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, this guy's so angry. He spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace one 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. So it was hot enough to burn you alive. Now he wants it 7 times hotter. And he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their loosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the very men who went to throw them in the fire died from the fire. What happens to these guys? And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto him, the king, O true, king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hope. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. The angel of the Lord, the Son of God, came in the midst of the fire. The very men who threw them in died. And here they are, walking with Jesus in the midst of the fire. What fire are you going through? Jesus did come down later. That was the last appearance that we understand of the angel of the Lord. But then we didn't need him to come as an angel because he came and became a man for you and me. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love for us. Thank you for your care. And thank you, though, in all these encounters, you just took ordinary people. You spoke to them. And when they listened, you did wonderful things. When you came later, you used little children, fish and bread, and little bits of faith here and there. And you touched people's lives. Help us be those ordinary people